So the journey I thought I was on was all the things that many entrepreneurs think that they want, which is freedom of time and financial freedom and, just legacy and all super important stuff. Right. But really now closing in on 50, it's really about the meaning and purpose and serving those people that are in the shoes that I was once in. So biggest challenge really has been that shift from learning and thinking. Your intro talks about slaying the dragon, and when I was listening to it, I was like, immediately I said, well, you can slay a dragon, but there's two more behind that dragon, and when you slay those two, there's four behind that, and really this idea that there's always new beginnings, but there's never an end to this. And so I was playing out of the gate to get to the end, to the result, to success. And now I've learned that success is really just knowing that there's just multiple new beginnings. There's always new dragons.
We're your co-hosts, Vicky and Laura, and this is the Resilient Entrepreneurs Podcast, the ultimate guide for ambitious business founders and startups. Hear from business heroes who've faced unexpected challenges as we unpack how they slayed their dragon and reignite your instinct to conquer your dragon.
We love to go back a little bit as we find out who you are. Let's find out what your childhood was like. Take us back to a story there that might have influenced who you've become today.
I feel like I should be lying on a couch right now to go back into my
you should.
childhood. Yeah.
You're with the coach. You're in good hands.
All right, good. I'm trusting both of you, and I'm excited to be here. But my childhood, very humble to say the least. That we grew up. It's funny. My mom will listen to this, and she'll poke at me because she's like, every time I listen to you on a podcast, we become poorer and poorer, right? And the reality is we grew up, lower middle class, I'll say, for mom, right? We weren't poor, but we certainly didn't have extras. We had a manufactured home. We had one reliable automobile. We took one family vacation that was about an hour away because that's about as far as we could get. And so my lens growing up was time and money being linear, meaning you spend your time working and you get paid for those hours. And if you want more money, you work more hours, right? Or get overtime or, what have you. And, really when I got into adulthood, my eyes were open to this entire world of leveraging time and leveraging money and multiplying time and money through entrepreneurship and using, I shouldn't say using, but leveraging the time of others, right? And so, from if we go back to my childhood, very simple. We were pre-cell phones. When I graduated high school, we were just getting our first computers in the school. So I kind of I was the last generation to live that normal, boring, simple life. And then when I started adulthood is when the digitally dominated world came in. And we'll get into, I'm sure, when we talk about relationship marketing, how that benefited me, because I truly believe what was once old is new again. And the eyeball to eyeball stuff off the computers and phones is much more impactful and meaningful when it comes to relationships and doing business.
Yeah, wow. So when did your entrepreneurial spirit first appear?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I remember vividly, I don't know how old, but if I had a guess, I was probably in like second, third grade. I would make scratch off lottery tickets. Okay, this is totally illegal, but I think I'm past statute of limitations now, right? So I would take paper, cut it into the size of a lottery ticket, and you could use a Crayola crayon, the silver, to cover whatever the winnings or not winnings were going to be. And I literally went door to door in my neighborhood selling these. And we talk about leveraging other people's money. My father kept a coffee can of his change, right? So he would, pay for something with cash and we'd get coins, or he'd get coins back in change. And then I would steal that money and that's how I would pay the people who won. Right? So my entrepreneurial journey began selling illegal lottery tickets at the age of 8, door to door. But now I've always had it. I've always wanted to do my own thing and just be creative and sell stuff. But formally, my entrepreneurial journey began after I had a couple meltdowns outside of my control. I was working in real estate, not too far from Laura. I was in the Mid-Atlantic region or outside of Washington, D.C., and built a nice career there, working for another company in sales. And then the real estate market went kaput, and I transitioned out of there and went into mortgages, which was brilliant. I became one of the top mortgage producers in America. And then in 2008, the financial world melted down, and HSBC got rid of 6,500 jobs. On a Monday, I was one of them. And so it was in 2009 that I finally said enough is enough. If I'm going to crash and burn again, it's going to be on my own, right? I'm going to do my own thing. I was sick of just being a number on a spreadsheet and kind of a victim of external circumstances with market shifts. And so in 2009, I opened my first insurance agency. And in the past 15 years, that's led to multiple insurance agencies, a coaching, consulting, training company, and a real estate company as well.
Wow, that's busy. That sounds busy,
Yeah,
but I
yeah, and
like
a wife
that.
and 3 kids to boot. So we
Oh,
we
you
we
gotta
don't
add
stop.
all the extras. Why did you choose that path to go into that? I guess you're quite familiar with the real estate and to the
Mhm.
insurance, but what drove you to that? Was that a bit of a
Yeah,
passion?
insurance simply was residual income. Everything I had done in sales was a month to month grind where, you kicked butt in September and you were a hero on September 30th. And then October 1st, you were a piece of crap again, starting from the beginning. And it's a grind, and it really wore on me after years and years and years of month to month sales. Like I said, I did well, but it was exhausting. And so, again, going back to leverage and multiplying my time with insurance, I said, if I can sell a policy today and strengthen that relationship and add value and deliver at a high level for that family for 30 years, I can get paid 90 plus times, on the policies that I wrote 3 decades earlier. And so it really was the residual impact that drew me to the insurance game.
Thanks for that, Scott. It's something that not all entrepreneurs think about. I think this whole trading time for money is ingrained in us, and it's something that we need to learn, we need to unlearn and lean into the leverage. I'm curious because your topic, your kind of, I don't know, tell me if I'm off base here, but it seems that your topic of passion and real interest at this stage, and certainly of your book, is about relationship marketing. So I'm curious, how do you leverage relationships?
Yeah, great question. Like I said, we're coming off of a pretty brutal time in 2008 where our portfolio had collapsed, our real estate holdings had collapsed. We were frankly on the verge of bankruptcy and foreclosure because of a couple of business deals and personal deals. And when I started with no money and very limited resources. And so traditional marketing and advertising tells you spend money, you create an ad and marketing campaign, and you hope that people call or walk into your business. And I learned quickly that gets very expensive, and I had very little control over it. And it really was through observing someone that came into my agency who was a real estate agent, the owner of a real estate brokerage, who I'd never met before. And she visited me the week I opened, and she just had a real deep, rich, meaningful conversation with me to learn more about me. And I didn't even know who she was or what she did. It was just, hey, why did you open the business? Tell me about your family. Tell me about your passion and your purpose, and what you want to do in the community. And maybe I can introduce you to this person or that person in my network. And after about 20 minutes, I'm like, wow, I really like this person. Still had no idea who she was or what she did. And on the way out, she said, by the way, my name is Becky Smith and I own Accent Brokerage, the real estate firm just a town over. and no ask for anything, no agenda. Truly just came in with a servant's heart to learn more about me, introduce herself. And then after that, I got a follow up note in the mail, handwritten card. After that, she stopped by with a little gift, little thoughtful gift, and I'm talking about a month and a half in between. And then she introduced me to someone in her network, and it was just systematically, without me even realizing it, Becky kept showing up in a thoughtful, meaningful way. And the aha moment occurred about 6 months after meeting Becky. I was meeting with a customer for her insurance. She was recently widowed, and she was going to sell her home. She said, "It's just too much for me to handle by myself. I want to sell the home." And I said, "Do you have a real estate agent?" And she said, "Gosh, it's been over 30 years since we've bought or sold a property. I wouldn't even know where to start." And I said, "My gosh, you have to contact Becky Smith. Like, she's the best." And it was like Isaac Newton, when the apple fell on his head and he figured out gravity. That's when I learned about the law of reciprocity. Becky asked me for nothing, and I wanted to give her everything and everyone that needed a realtor. She was now my person. And it clicked that if I can take that approach, and instead of coldly going after 10,000 potential customers in my market in the traditional expensive way, if I can go after a couple hundred people, key relationships who are already doing business with my potential clients, then the relationships I have with them will lead me to the people they know. And my all-in focus on relationship marketing was born. And really, to your point, Vicky, I've got that. That is my passion. That is really just, I don't sell anything. I have no agenda. I have an abundance mindset. I want to help people, deliver for them, and expect nothing in return. But what always happens is when you do that first part, and you're true about it, and sincere, they want to give you everything in return, to the point where now, my agencies receive over 1,000 new referrals every year, and that's been the case for over a decade, to the point where we couldn't even stop people from referring if we wanted to, because of the depth of the relationships we've cultivated.
Wow. I think that's such an incredible insight to the power of community and doing things in service to others. I think when you get into that mindset as an entrepreneur, it really does change. And I love what you just said, the law of reciprocity, because it's something we've talked about before, Vicky and I, a lot. And but you brought the example so clear. I think that really is going to be helpful to a lot of entrepreneurs who are trying to figure out just how to start, And the example of Becky just showing up, finding out about you, being curious. Curiosity plays a big part in that. Um, let's say if you're talking to a brand new entrepreneur, like what's the first like bit of advice you'd give them to get started to build some relationship marketing?
Yeah. And both of you obviously are in branding and marketing. So, that the key is top of mind awareness, right? When somebody thinks about your products or services, how do we get them to think about you? Right. That's the home run. After that, the baton gets passed to sales, right? Now, what are we doing from a system process standpoint to turn those opportunities into sales? But from a pure branding marketing standpoint, it's just at bats, to use a baseball term, right? It's just opportunities, top of mind awareness. And so the first advice I would give a new entrepreneur is play the long game. And it's so difficult to do, because I get it. The rent's due, payrolls due, right? I mean, it's just, you've got to feed the family. And so to say, go slow and develop these relationships and it will pay off over time is easy to say. It's super hard to do. And I'm not saying this is an all or nothing approach. And I still don't do that, by the way. I still use SEO, and certain Google ad spends, and I have a billboard, and so I'm not anti all things traditional marketing. But the foundation, the core of everything we do is built around relationships. So the advice I would give is play the long game, get strategic and intentional with everything you do when it comes to relationships. Because what I'll get a lot is people say, "Well, Scott, I've tried that. It doesn't really work." There's no real ROI, right? So how do you quantify ROI in a relationship, especially in this connection economy where, again, things are not linear? I may have a great relationship with you. You never refer anybody to me. And I'm like, well, that's a crappy relationship. No, it's not, right? Because Laura may know Vicky and Vicky may know someone who becomes my greatest referral source ever, but I never would have met them without the two of you connecting me. So be patient, be strategic and intentional with how you show up with consistency. If I were to give you the one word problem that I have dedicated my life to solving for small business owners, it's inconsistency. Everybody knows what they should be doing, and everybody tries certain things at certain times, but they lack the consistency to figure out, is this really working long term? So patience and consistency would be my advice. And then I would tell that new entrepreneur, you're not going to follow it. You're going to want to stray. And that's where the accountability partner or the coach comes in to hold your feet to the fire, to make sure that you're doing the things that you said were important to you on day one.
Hang on, hold that thought. I apologize for the interruption. I just wanted to take 15 seconds of your time to thank you for being a part of this growing community of resilient entrepreneurs. If you could do us just one massive favor and subscribe, you'll be notified of the next great episode of this podcast. And speaking of great episodes, let's get right back to it.
Good advice. Absolutely. And I was about to ask you, yeah, but what if they don't do it? And you answered the question. It's about accountability. It's about having the coach. It's about having somebody in your corner to remind you of your why it's important to you in the first place. Yeah. And because life does have a way of distracting us, I suppose, from the things that we really care about.
Especially the entrepreneur,
Yeah.
especially the small business, right? Because the number of hats that you have to wear, right? You're the VP of 14 different departments when you first open. And it's out of, again, necessity. Like you can't. So people say, well, how do you scale? And you scale by slowly replacing yourself in each of those departments, right? So which one do I have the least amount of time, interest, and knowledge, right? I know it's important, but it's just not for me. Replace yourself there first, right? Then keep working your butt off to do what you have to do to get the resources to look at the next place that isn't worth your time, and then replace yourself there. And that's how you slowly scale this thing, because yeah, we do get torn in a million different directions, and that's how it's going to be, out of the gate for the newbies. And so really it's figuring out where your focus needs to be. Not saying you don't do the other things, but your initial work is to replace yourself in those departments.
Yeah. Scott, you released a book this year,
I did.
Referrals Done Right. So I imagine there's a system or a something, number of steps formula. Is that something you're willing to share with us
Absolutely.
on how to do referrals right?
Yeah. So the funny thing about the book, and we've been very blessed to have a great network and great success with this. We recently hit the USA Today bestseller list, which is awesome. So people are buying it, which is great. I share that because the title I don't love, but I went with it because referrals, people understand that in the business world, but it really is a book about relationships. But if you go with relationships done right, it ends up in a whole different section of the bookstore, and it doesn't make sense, right? And so really we're trying inside the book to get you away from referrals. Referrals is on the cover, but it's really about relationships and introductions, right? Meaningful connections. And the system that you ask about, I've coined it the infinite referral advantage. And it really opens up with this David Goliath story, where as a small business owner, we are the David. And if you look back to the David and Goliath story, everyone thinks it's the greatest underdog story of all time. But the reality is, if that fight were to happen 10 times, David is going to win 10 out of 10 times. Like that was never an underdog story, because the giant showed up with armor and a sword on foot, and David showed up with a slingshot that he was masterful at using, which basically became a gun at a sword fight. And that is how I position the small business owner. Like, what is your advantage? What can you do that the behemoths of the industry, the multi-million dollar, billion-dollar corporations can't. And what they can't do, for the most part, is they can't develop the relationships in the communities that are hyper focused on meeting values and needs within your community, the way we can. And so, really, the infinite referral advantage takes five different S words, if you will. And it's networking with fellow small business owners, getting involved with the schools, which is your future generation marketing, future employees, um, getting involved with service organizations, your nonprofits, your civic organizations, um, leveraging your star customers. So your best customers are just an extension of your sales team. Actually, they become your best salespeople if you coach and condition them properly, and you turn them into raving fans of you and your product and your service. So if I have the greatest marketing or ad campaign in the world that tells you why you should do business with me, people's BS meters are still high. Right? They're like, Scott's trying to sell me something here. What's the hook? What's the catch? But if Laura becomes a customer and we deliver on our value proposition and she's wowed by the experience, and then she tells Vicky that, hey, if you're looking for insurance, you got to go see Scott. And here's why. Way more powerful than anything I could ever do. So our star customers become some of our best salespeople. And then the last piece of it is really where you two spend a ton of time is branding, right? So it's social media. That's being social, but then also social media. And how do you leverage everything you're doing with your customers and the service and the community and the schools and highlighting fellow small business owners through your social media channels so that you're cross-pollinating markets and really showing the brand that you want to be seen as. So that is the 5-step process that you're asking about, Vicky.
Yeah, I love the conversation around branding and brand awareness because so many people think that brand is your identity, which are actually two separate things. Your identity is your logo and your messaging and the things that you create when you're first starting out in your business. But the awareness, the piece that's intangible, is the most important part, which is exactly what you're talking about. It's what other people say about you. Right? When you're not in the room. Who did that quote? I think it was Jeff Bezos that said that's what a brand is. What people say about you when you're not in the room, and that's exactly it. It's those customers that are wowed and happy and satisfied that then go tell their friends all about you. So it's really important along the whole customer journey to be invested in creating the business that people get excited about. So creating a beautiful business and a beautiful brand is not nearly as important as how you treat the customers along the whole journey and how you build that. And I think that's an important message for entrepreneurs. Yeah. Don't get so caught up in the pretty stuff and in the, just having someone build you an identity, but really think about the strategy of how are you going to connect on a deeper level and build those relationships all along the journey. That's what keeps the sales funnel full and the, customers coming, and you build, and then you can scale from there. It's a long journey. It's a long process too.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. The one thing that the three of us have in common, you probably don't even realize this. I don't even know if it's on my bio, but we're all journalists at heart.
Oh,
You two
interesting.
actually did it. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in journalism and then never actually wrote for a newspaper. I wrote for my college newspaper, but it's a whole
That
thing.
counts.
It's a whole thing,
Look at
which
you.
again went back to money. Like I needed more money. I couldn't do the journalism thing, so I ended up in sales. But that
I
aside,
think
yeah,
that's why we all left journalism in the end.
Let's be honest. Let's be honest.
but
It's
I think
true.
it's important to mention and double down on what Laura said, because really what we all do is we help people tell their story. And it's so important when we're talking about brand and even in sales, right? I just did a webinar where I was explaining that the actual sales part of the sales process should only be about 10% of the conversation. 90% of it is discovering who you're talking to and what's important to them and what struggles and pain points they have. And then, how can we solve that? And then when we present, we're presenting a customized, solution to their problems. Well, none of that's possible if we don't find the needs. And so as journalists, at heart, that really is what we're doing. What makes the other person tick? What's their story? how can I help them share their story with the world? Use my platform. Let me get you in front of my audience. And then, they want to do the same. And so when we're talking about personal brand, people don't, we make buying decisions on emotion, not logic. And you can have the most logical products and services in the world, but if people don't buy into your story, you're not going to have a brand. And really it goes back to like think about like a t-shirt might cost $2, a plain t-shirt, but you put that Nike swoosh on it and people pay 30. Well, why? Right? Because they're bought into who Nike is, what they stand for, and they want to be a part of it, and that's brand.
Exactly.
Well said. Well said. I think we might just snip that out and turn it into a reel.
Maybe I can get some
So,
money from Nike. I don't know.
Yeah,
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 brand
yeah,
deal.
yeah. Yeah. And so you're talking there, in my words, you're talking there about being curious, leading with curiosity with your clients, with referral partners, really just wanting to get to know the person for the person. So, Scott, I'd like to do that with you today. So, you'd be familiar with the hero's journey. It's the famous and the ultimate way of storytelling. Tell us first, what was the quest you set off on your hero's journey, and what challenge did you first meet that at the time might have felt insurmountable?
Ooh, that's deep. I like it. Ultimately, I would say, as I reflect, I didn't know the journey I was on when I first started. I'm a ready, fire, aim kind of guy, and I just jump and figure it out on the way down kind of guy. And so in retrospect, looking back, I would say the journey I was on, and I'm still on, is to serve the person I once was. And I had a lot of struggles. I had a lot of expensive, both financially and just emotionally, lessons along the way. And so, really, now, as I'm on the backside of my career, how can I take those lessons I learned and serve the person I once was? I was a teenager lacking confidence. I was filled with self doubt. I didn't feel I was worthy of success when I was in my teen years. And I really want to get into the schools and help kids understand that you are worthy. And everyone has that negative self talk in the back of their mind that's telling them they're not good enough, strong enough, smart enough, confident enough. And then how do we silence that voice? The path to entrepreneurship, and this is not knocking college at all, but in this day and age, with the amount of access we have to information, there's no better time to be an entrepreneur. Because we can listen to podcasts like this and read books and TED Talks, and entrepreneurs want to help other entrepreneurs, especially newbies, and so learning how to network with them. So the journey, I thought I was on was all the things that many entrepreneurs think that they want, which is freedom of time and financial freedom and just legacy and all super important stuff, right? But really now, closing in on 50, it's really about the meaning and purpose and serving those people that are in the shoes that I was once in. So biggest challenge really has been that shift from learning and thinking. Your intro talks about slaying the dragon, and when I was listening to it, I was like, immediately I said, well, you can slay a dragon, but there's two more behind that dragon. And when you slay those two, there's four behind that. And really this idea that there's always new beginnings, but there's never an end to this. And so I was playing out of the gate to get to the end, to the result, to success. And now I've learned that success is really just knowing that there's just multiple new beginnings. There's always new dragons.
Yeah. It's like playing a video game, right? You get to the next level and that next level is just that little bit harder. And then you conquer that one, you get to the next level and it's just a little bit harder, but that's what makes you want to keep playing the game.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that because that's a common thing I get with new entrepreneurs is when does it get easier? When does it get better? When do and my answer is it doesn't. It gets different, but it never gets easier. And the best advice I can give is always have that beginner's mindset. Always stay curious. Always, look at it as your first year. So this is my 15th year in business, but in my mind, it's my 15th first year, because we're always resetting and looking at, okay, this we got 1 year to make this happen, right? And so that as we approach 2025, I'm not one for New Year's resolutions, but I do like new beginnings and new hope and kind of a reset, and that's how I approach business. Is every year is just my first year again.
Yeah, that's such an important message for entrepreneurs to hear, because I think when you normalize the fact that it's just you're gonna just keep coming up with new problems, new issues, new things to conquer. It kind of takes away from the like fear of them because you just expect that they're gonna come. They just are. And you kind of get through one thing, and your first challenge is making profit, right? Most entrepreneurs, their first challenge is just making the money to survive and to make it into a full-time gig, and then, okay, you conquer that challenge. What's next? Then you got to figure out how to scale, right? Then you're going to figure out how to deal with people. And then you're going to have more money, maybe investments. And then you're going to have to figure out how to manage that successfully. And then you've got responsibilities of payroll and you got to figure out that. And then global things happen that you have no control over and you got to navigate that. So it just becomes different. So I think you've got to be the type of person that's like, all right, I'm in it. I've got the grit. I've got the resilience and you got to go for it. Because I think resilience is a big part of surviving entrepreneurship a little bit is resilience. So what does it mean to you? How does somebody become a resilient entrepreneur?
Yeah, I don't know if there is another kind. I don't know if there's another successful kind, long lasting. Like you have to be resilient. And when I thought about the word resilient before joining you two, it really the first word I wrote down was curious. Right. How do I remain curious, like Laura just mentioned, in a world where we can master the mundane and we can get comfortable and complacent with certain things that work. But if we're in a growth state, we're always going to be uncomfortable, which makes us resilient. And one thing that I would say about resiliency is that it's earned, not learned. No one can teach you how to be resilient. You have to fall off the metaphorical bike or the literal bike when you're first starting, and get up and try it again. And Muhammad Ali, the great boxer, once says, "You don't lose a fight when you get knocked down. You lose when you stay down." And so resiliency is the ability to continuously get up, even when you don't want to, even when you think it doesn't make sense, even if you know the person in front of you is going to knock you down again, but you keep getting up. And I can't teach you how to do that. Right? You've got to earn that, and you earn it by doing it with consistency. So that's kind of my thought on resiliency.
That's a new take on resiliency, that it's curiosity as well. I really enjoy that, and earn, not learned. So, Scott, we like to do a kind of a three take. How am I saying this? Three key takeaways from the conversation. And we would love to invite you to share what your three takeaways from the conversation have been. And Laura and I will do the same. Who's going first today?
Well, it's your show, so I'll defer to you, and then
Okay,
I'll steal and I'll steal all of your ideas.
expand on
That's
all of
usually what
that.
happens.
That's actually how I built my
Yeah.
career. That's the real secret. For those that made it to the end of this, just cheat off other people's paper, do what's working.
Sell counterfeit scratchies.
Yeah, don't do that unless you're like 7.
Yeah, that's so funny. I think one of the big ones at the very beginning, you mentioned about the law of reciprocity. And for me, I think that is really key for people to understand that the more you give, the more you receive. I mean, it's so absolutely true. Vicky and I started this business just giving free webinars. We found a lot of small business owners were struggling through the beginning of the pandemic, getting online, getting their social media up to scratch. And we just gave webinars. We didn't know what was going to come of it. We didn't do it expecting clients. We just did it because we saw there was a need. And so much grew out of that. So much of how we've built our business today has grown out of it, including this podcast, because we saw that what a lot of entrepreneurs needed was mindset. So talking to successful entrepreneurs like you, Scott, helps the new entrepreneurs understand these things like the law of reciprocity. So I think that was a really big one for me. Another big takeaway for me was the value of meaningful connections. Often, in this social media age we're all in, the follower count that we have is somehow connected to our worth, which I don't believe. But the meaningfulness of those connections is sort of the key. Just having a whole bunch of followers that follow you for a whole bunch of different reasons isn't going to benefit you in business. But having meaningful ones that can become great referral partners can be a huge benefit. But it takes time, right? That return on investment is not immediate. So keep that in mind too. And then what you just said is that when you're in a growth state, we're always uncomfortable. And we talk a lot about that, about the power of being uncomfortable and stretching outside of our comfort zone. And, it's not outside the comfort zone. It's like that ever stretching elastic band. You just keep stretching it. So your comfort zone keeps getting bigger and bigger. If you told me 5 years ago I'd be a host of a podcast today, I'd think you were insane because public speaking was never something I wanted to do. But we've continuously stretched that comfort zone of ours. And now here we are. And I get to talk to people like you. All
Well,
right,
you're
I'll throw it
you're
over.
great at what you do. I never would have guessed you were nervous about public speaking 5 years ago.
Thank you.
It is. It's a beautiful thing that we get to do together from opposite sides of the world, I might add. Yeah, so I'm going to go next. I have more than three, but I'll try to keep it to three. One is I absolutely love that you're always in your first year, even though you've been in business for 15 years. That's a great takeaway. And it goes hand in hand with your mission to serve the person you once were. I think those are concepts that are really worth pondering, really worth asking ourselves as listeners. Perhaps that's something that we could ask ourselves, weekly. How am I doing on that? Am I serving the person I once was? And am I still in my first year of business? Am I leading with enough curiosity? Am I fresh eyes, fresh heart? So the other lovely takeaway is that there's always another dragon. I love the dragon conversation, and we've had all kinds of iterations around the dragon and who she is and what she does and what you should do with her. Well, I love that there's always another one. So it's that expectation on self when you're running a business that you're never done. And I think that's such an important mindset to have. And I don't know about you, Scott, but I really believe that mindset's everything in business. Without a winning mindset, you're just not going to make it. It doesn't matter how good you are.
Yeah, I
It's
would even
important to us that people make it.
take that into personal life as well, and one thing that I'm always focused on is perspective, with the mindset. There's a million different ways you can just change the lens and look at it from a different point of view. And a big part of that is gratitude, and really understand that everything's happening for you. Right. There are no failures. There are no losses. There's setbacks. There's challenges. There's obstacles. There always will be. Um, but look at all the blessings. Look at all the beauty that you are surrounded by. And it kind of helps put those dragons in perspective.
It really does. And I think we need to shout out to Mr. Conyers at this point, your fifth grade teacher, who might have started you on this road to understanding humanity and mindset.
Yeah, so we actually named our second son Connor, after Mr. Connor. So my wife and I grew up in the same town. We were not high school sweethearts, but as it turns out, it all came full circle. But we both had Mr. Connors, and he was our favorite teacher, both of us. And I chased perfection as a child, in school, and to me, if you weren't perfect, you were a failure. If you didn't get 100 on a test, you were a failure. And And so the Mr. Connors piece is the first time I failed a test. Well, two things happened that year: that I failed the test for the first time, and then there was actually like I had 100 in math, which is really funny looking back on it because I've lost interest in math. I outsource all things math, finances, accounting, bookkeeping. But that particular year, I had gotten a perfect score on every single test, and then I got one wrong at the end, and it crushed me. And and I literally was holding back tears and maybe let a couple go. And as I left school that day, and Mr. Connors was able to use that as an opportunity to explain to me that perfection is a myth, right? Nobody's perfect, and this is how we learn and we grow. And that's something I've held close to me, throughout my journey, is giving myself permission to fail. And now with 24 employees, I'm constantly encouraging them to fail, right? And again, that goes back to the discomfort and the growth, and the mindset that failure is just feedback. Failure is telling us, okay, it didn't work this way, but it's bringing us closer to a way that will. And whatever that way that will work does work, that's not going to be forever either, right? And so we're constantly in a state of failure and adjustment. So yeah, that would be my shout out to Mr. Connors, who's no longer with us, but he was a hell of a man, and he made it like 90 years, so he had a good run. My three, I'm going to go back to what Laura said, which is doing it for free. So that's why I let you guys recap first, because I picked that one up just now, and I think that's super important. And I have multiple insurance agencies. I never set out to have a 7-figure coaching business. I set out to help the person I once was, and so I started doing all of these free training seminars and webinars and traveling around the country on my own dime, filling rooms at hotels, hotel conference rooms, to just help new entrepreneurs in this space. And I was going broke. I was losing, valuable time to build my own business. And then I saw on social, right? Comparison is the thief of joy. But I saw on social that some people I was working with that had gone to a seminar and paid like $2,000 to go to this 2-day seminar to learn the same stuff I was teaching them for free. And I met with a mentor of mine, and he said, Scott, if you're doing it for free, it has no value. Like, you have to charge for your services. Like, the information, the systems and processes you have, they work, they're worth money, and you need to monetize it, and people will take it seriously. And so, against my better judgment, I started charging for my workshops. But what had happened, because I did it all for free and I led with my best, I didn't hold anything back. I built this tribe of followers who now, when I started charging, I instantly had a whole community of people willing to pay. And we went from $0, actually losing money, to 2 years later being a 7-figure coaching business. And it never would have happened if I didn't put myself out there and do it for free and get my reps and kind of work out the kinks there and build the community. So for those that think it's a waste of time or money to offer your best information or knowledge for free, I would challenge you there, because you're building the audience, and this goes full circle back to relationships. You're building the relationship so that when you do ask for money, they see the value and they're more likely to give it to you versus just giving you money right out of the gate. So lead with your best. I can't stress enough the servant's heart. The quote I use all the time is that when you do the right thing for the right person at the right moment, you can never be wrong. And so often in business, and that's the why the title of the book was Referrals Done Right, because the wrong way to do it is this cringy, I help you, you help me. I'm only helping you with the expectation of something in return, and I'll only help you if you promise to give me something in return. And that's the old school cringy way of doing business in this referral marketing, forced networking type situations. So really, we're trying to flip the script and just do the right thing for the right person at the right time, and you'll never be wrong. So have that servant's heart. And then the last piece, I'd be remiss if I didn't end with consistency. With whatever you're doing, you just have to consistently show up as the best version of you every single day, and that's going to look different every single day. But Laura mentioned earlier the word grit. I actually have the words on one sneaker. I have the word grit stitched in, and the other sneaker I have faith. And grit and faith really just says you got to have the grit to continuously show up every day, and you have to have the faith to keep doing it consistently, even when you don't see results. You have to have the faith that the things are brewing, they're happening, even though you can't see them. And that's really what faith is. It's belief in something that you can't see. There's no rational reason for you to have faith, but you do. So grit and faith, and remain consistent.
Oh my God, I love that. That is such an incredible way to put it, the grit and the faith. Because here's the thing with marketing, right? Because Vicky and I are, of course, that's what we do is marketing. Everyone wants what's the return on investment? If I put out this ad, what's the return on investment? If I do this thing, what's the return on investment? And I'm trying to teach people that when it comes to branding and brand awareness, you're not going to see that return on investment potentially for years. And it's going to be really hard to see any return on investment for referral marketing. But it's this sort of exponential curve. Like you may not see it for a really long time, and then that's that J curve that all of a sudden just shoots right up. And you don't always know what that tipping point is going to be, but there is always a tipping point in business where things just happen. But it's all that groundwork you put in, all the grit, all the resilience, all the, relationships you build, all that you've given, and just holding on to that faith, realizing that it takes time. But when you're building such a strong, solid foundation of giving and sharing and having quality behind what you do, that builds over time exponentially, and you get to seven figures. And it might take 2 years, it might take 5 years. None of us are really going to know. But if you're doing something great and you have the faith that this is the right thing and you're doing it for, I think a lot of entrepreneurs do build something for what they needed. Vicky talks about that with coaching. She's the coach she needed when she started business. I love to teach and train entrepreneurs. So I want to be the teacher and the trainer I needed when I first became an entrepreneur, trying to figure this crazy world out. So be the thing for others, give it back as much as you can, and it comes back to you tenfold. I believe it. I think you've explained it so beautifully today. And I so appreciate this entire conversation. Scott, it's been incredible to get to know you and your business and what you do and how you help others, and how you're now inspiring other entrepreneurs to go out there and get it for themselves too. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been a blast.